"You're not needed anymore," my daughter said on her wedding day, just before the vows. I stood frozen behind the last row, holding the speech I had spent weeks writing, my fingers numb around the folded paper. She didn't even look at me when she said it. "Before we continue, let me tell you something. You are a proud senior and a really beautiful personality. Please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in from in the comments." The pastor cleared his throat. The violinist shifted. Guests turned in their seats, waiting for the bride to take her place. But I couldn't move, not because my legs were tired, but because something inside me had snapped. My daughter, my little girl who once made me pinky promise that I'd walk her down the aisle, the same one who used to fall asleep on my chest after watching Disney movies, the same one I'd taught to ride a bike, to tie her shoes, to change a tire, now stood in a white gown, arm in arm with Marcus, and told me to sit this one out. "Third row, Dad," she had said this morning, handing me a schedule like I was part of the catering staff. "No speech, okay? Let's not make things weird." Weird. She didn't call it heartbreaking. She called it weird. She said Marcus's stepdad was giving the toast, said it would be funnier that way, said it was modern. I swallowed the insult and nodded, like I've always done. Even when I paid for her entire college education without telling her where the money came from. Even when I took out a loan to cover her car repairs while Marcus was still job hunting. Even when I emptied my savings to pay for this exact wedding she just uninvited me from. I sat in the back while people clapped and cheered. I watched her laugh and pose, her arm looped with her mother's, the same woman who hadn't been around since she was 6, but still got to walk her down the aisle. And I, the man who never missed a school recital, who stayed up through fevers, who learned how to braid hair from YouTube, I got a seat in the third row. She wore my mother's earrings. She used the family Bible I gave her as part of the ceremony. But when it came time for acknowledgements, silence. Not a word, not a mention. Not even a glance. After the ceremony, I waited by the edge of the church, still holding the folded speech in my pocket. She brushed past me on her way to the limousine, bouquet in hand, veil fluttering. "Dad," she said, pausing just long enough to sound polite, "we'll call you after the honeymoon, okay?" And then she was gone. Confetti flew, horns honked, everyone waved goodbye. And I stood there, like I had wandered into someone else's family photo. Back home, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat in the kitchen, staring at the marble countertops she picked out, the very ones I installed with my own hands when she moved back in after college. A wedding photo notification popped up on my phone. She looked radiant. Happy. I wasn't in a single picture. I opened the drawer where I kept important papers. The envelope was still there, labeled Clara's wedding. Inside were the receipts, the ones she never saw: $4,200 for the venue deposit, $1,750 for the dress, $3,600 for the florist. And the one that burned most, $9,000, transferred to Marcus for the honeymoon. The same honeymoon I just got dismissed before. I pulled out my notebook, opened the budgeting sheet. Line by line, I crossed out every future transfer, every automatic deposit, every silent gift I had planned. It wasn't rage, it wasn't bitterness. It was a realization. She had chosen to erase me in front of 200 guests. So maybe it was time to take back everything she no longer saw value in. starting tomorrow. The next morning, I woke up without an alarm, not because I had nowhere to be, but because sleep never really came. I had spent the night sitting upright in the armchair near the front window, still wearing the shirt from the wedding. The top button was undone. My tie had been tossed on the floor somewhere around midnight. The house felt colder, though the thermostat hadn't moved. I stood up slowly, bones stiff, shoulders heavier than usual, walked into the kitchen and turned on the coffee pot. The same one Clara used to fill when she'd visit after college, claiming, "Dad, yours tastes better than Starbucks." She hadn't come over in months. I watched the coffee drip, one drop at a time. Like everything in my life now moved slower, weighed down by invisible hands. I reached into the drawer beside the fridge and pulled out the old corkboard from beneath the stack of unused envelopes. Pinned to it were the things I kept out of habit. Her first honor roll certificate, a dry cleaning receipt from the day we picked up her graduation gown, a snapshot of us fixing the gutters together the summer after she got her first job. She had a streak of paint on her cheek, smiling so wide it made her eyes squint. That photo used to me. And everything. Now it felt like a postcard from a life that didn't exist anymore. The coffee pot beeped. I poured a cup and walked into my office. Sat down, switched on the desk lamp, and opened the folder labeled Joint Investments. She never knew about this part. She never asked. The trust I set up in her name when she turned 18. The rental property I bought under her initials so she wouldn't feel pressure about family money. The business account I opened under Marcus's name when his food truck idea got rejected by the bank. He didn't know I was the guarantor. Nobody did. It was easier that way, cleaner. They could succeed and feel like it was theirs. But standing in that church yesterday, watching her say, "I do," without a thank you or a nod in my direction, I realized I had created a world where my love came with no conditions, and in return, I received erasure. That's when I picked up the phone and called Mr. Patel, my lawyer of 16 years. "Morning, sir," he answered, cheerful as always. "Is the big day over?" I didn't reply right away. He waited. "I need to make some changes," I said. "To the trust?" he asked, his voice already shifting into business mode. "To everything." He was silent for a moment. Then understood. "I'll start drafting reversals and notifications. Should we schedule a full review?" "Yes," I said, "today." After we hung up, I stood and walked through the hallway. Every frame on the wall whispered old stories. Photos from school dances, holiday dinners, the day she got her first car. That car paid in cash from my emergency savings. She never knew. I just handed her the keys with a note inside that said, "For the miles ahead." I found that note yesterday in the trash, can beside the guest room. Crumpled, torn in half. Maybe it was accidental, or maybe that was her message all along. I went into the garage and opened the tall metal cabinet near the water heater. Inside were boxes, labeled by year, by expense, by purpose. The folder for wedding contributions was thick. Every vendor contract, every down payment, even the handwritten notes she gave me when asking for a little extra to cover unexpected costs. I flipped through one. "Dad, I hate to ask, but Marcus's suit is way over budget. Could you spot us? I promise we'll pay you back right after the honeymoon. She wrote that 2 months ago. I never expected the money back, never even brought it up. But now I started wondering, what would they do if all the things I had built quietly just disappeared? Would they notice? Would they care? Would they finally look back and see me again? I set the folder on the table, then another and another. I had a call with Patel in 2 hours. And for the first time, I wasn't doing paperwork to give. I was doing it to take back. My phone buzzed. A message from Clara. Hey, Dad, do you mind checking if the florist charged twice? I think we need a refund for one of the peony bouquets. Let me know when you get a chance. I stared at the screen. There was no apology, no reflection, no reference to what she had said to me at the altar. Just a refund request. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my banking app and began sorting through every recurring payment linked to her number, Marcus's business, the secondary emergency fund account I'd tied to her debit card without her knowing. All of it would be turned off. Not because I was angry, but because I finally saw the truth. I wasn't a father anymore. I had become a service. Available 24/7. No thanks required. That was ending today. I walked back into the living room and stood in front of the framed picture of us on her 16th birthday. She was holding a cake. I was holding her. She had written on the back in purple ink, "Best dad in the world, never let go." I took the frame off the wall and set it face down. It wasn't symbolic. It was necessary. By noon, I was in Mr. Patel's office. The paperwork was printed, stacked, and waiting. He didn't ask questions. I signed every page. Page by page, account by account, obligation by obligation. I dismantled the invisible empire I had built around her comfort. And when we were done, he looked up at me and said, "Do you want to notify them today?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "Let them feel it first." When I returned home, there were 3 new messages from Clara. None of them said, "Are you okay?" None of them said, "I'm sorry." The last one just said, "Marcus says the transfer for the honeymoon suite didn't go through. Can you check?" I powered off my phone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for choosing silence. I had been the foundation of everything. And now I was removing myself. Let them feel the absence. The way I felt it when she told me I wasn't needed anymore. By the 3rd day, the messages changed. No more emojis. No more casual tone. Clara's texts now came stacked, like bricks being thrown. At a locked door. "Dad, Marcus's card isn't working. We got a notification about the property taxes. Weren't those set to autopay? Did you change something?" I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I wanted her to sit in the quiet. The same quiet she left me in after her wedding, when she walked past me like a stranger, carrying my legacy in her hands, smiling for cameras I paid for. Now the silence was hers, and I knew exactly how heavy it could be. I poured a cup of tea and stood at the window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. It reminded me of the night her mother left. No goodbye, no closure, just headlights disappearing down a wet driveway while Clara slept upstairs clutching a teddy bear she named after me. She never asked where her mom went. She just looked at me the next morning and said, "Will you still be here?" And I said yes. Every day since, I made sure that answer stayed true. But now, she was the one who disappeared. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about wedding speeches or trust funds or floral refunds. It was about being erased. About a daughter rewriting her history to fit a narrative where I was no longer required. She wanted her new life to feel clean, uncomplicated. I was the complication. And now, for the first time, she was feeling what it meant to erase someone who held everything together. I stepped into my office and opened the file labeled Backup Accounts. One by one, I printed out closing notices. Patel had already initiated the terminations. Marcus's business lease revoked. Vendor auto payments cancelled. Secondary insurance, rider on their honeymoon, voided. Everything I had stitched quietly beneath the surface now unraveled. My phone rang. Clara. I let it go to voicemail. Then came another call. Then Marcus. Then her again. Finally, I picked up. She didn't wait for a greeting. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice wasn't angry. It was scared. "I just got off the phone with the property manager," she said. "He said the house lease reverted back to your name." I said nothing. "Dad, what's going on? Are you okay?" That question. Too late. "I'm fine," I said calmly. "Then why are you taking everything back?" she demanded. "Is this some kind of punishment?" "No," I said. "It's an adjustment." "To what?" "To the new version of my role," I said, still watching the rain. She fell silent. "You told me," I continued, "on your wedding day that I'm not needed anymore." "I didn't mean it like that." "But you said it, and you meant it enough to make sure I wasn't part of your vows, part of your walk down the aisle, part of anything." She sniffed. "I just didn't want drama. I didn't want to offend Mom." "She left you." "I didn't." She didn't reply. "Everything I ever gave was a choice, not an obligation," I said. "But the moment you decided I didn't belong, that choice became mine too." She paused, her voice cracking. "I didn't think you'd cut us off." "I didn't," I said. "You did." She cried then, quietly, the kind of cry that sounds like someone realizing something too late. "I thought you'd always be there," she whispered. That sentence hit hard. Not because it was wrong, but because it was exactly what I wanted to hear 2 days ago. "Maybe," I said, "that was the problem." I hung up. Gently. No drama. Just a click into silence. And I stood there, hands still on the phone, realizing that for the first time she had finally felt what I had been carrying for years. Not rejection, but absence. Later that afternoon, Marcus showed up. Unannounced. Pulled into my driveway in the same car I helped him fix last year when the transmission failed. He didn't knock right away. Just stood at the front porch, shuffling nervously, glancing back at his phone like it might tell him what to say. I opened the door before he knocked. His mouth opened, then shut, like a kid caught stealing. "Hey," he said. "Marcus." He offered a half smile. "Look, man, I think this got bigger than it needed to be." Did it? He shifted. I just mean, we didn't mean to cut you out. We just wanted to start fresh, be independent. But obviously we didn't realize how much you were doing behind the scenes. No, I said, you didn't. He ran a hand through his hair. Clara's upset. She thinks you hate her. I don't hate her, I said, but I no longer support people who treat me like a utility. He flinched. I get that, he mumbled, but we're married now. We're a team. Then figure it out like one. He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time, I saw understanding in his eyes. Not respect, but recognition. That the man he once called, the old guy who just pays for stuff, was more than a background character. He nodded slowly. I get it, he said again. We'll figure it out. I closed the door without a word. Not to be cold, but because the conversat. Iron was over. The balance had shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And sometimes, freedom looks like silence on your phone and peace in your living room. That evening, I opened the folded speech I never gave at the wedding. Read it to myself, line by line. And when I reached the end, I tore it gently down the middle and tossed it into the fireplace. It burned slowly. Like the last remnants of a role I no longer needed to play. She wasn't always like this. There was a time when Clara would sit on the kitchen counter with her legs swinging, watching me cook dinner like it was a magic show. Don't burn the sauce, Daddy, she'd say, even if I wasn't making sauce. She was 5 when her mom left. I didn't tell her the truth. I said Mommy had to go help Grandma. And when Clara asked why Mommy didn't call anymore, I said, she's probably really busy. But every night, after I tucked her in, I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how to raise a child with just my 2 hands and an exhausted heart. She never saw that part. She just saw the man who always showed up. Open lunchbox, note from Dad. New haircut, Dad's clumsy hands, and YouTube tutorials. Field trip permission slip, signed, always. Parent-teacher conferences. I was the only dad who showed up every time, often between double shifts. She loved science. One summer, we made a volcano out of papier-mâché. It exploded all over the dining room. She cried because she thought I'd be mad about the mess. I laughed and told her, real science gets messy. We cleaned it together. That was our rhythm. Mess, laughter, clean up, repeat. And even though money was tight, even though I skipped new shoes so she could have her ballet lessons, I never felt poor. Because she smiled like I was enough. But somewhere between middle school and Marcus, things shifted. It started small. Less time at home, more time with Mom's side. Then came the criticisms. Dad, why do you still drive that old truck? Can we not talk about money? It's embarrassing. Marcus says your parenting style is a little intense. And just like that, I became the outdated model. Still running, still reliable, but not shiny enough for the showroom. I tried. God knows I tried. When she moved in with Marcus after college, I bought them a fridge when theirs broke. She said thanks. Marcus didn't say anything. When they got engaged, I offered to help with planning. She said, We've got it covered. But the vendors still sent me the bills. I paid anyway, because that's what fathers do. Even when they're no longer invited to the table, they still make sure the table is steady. One night, 6 months before the wedding, she came over for dinner. It was rare by then. She poked at the food, barely touched her plate. I asked how work was. She said, fine. I asked about wedding colors. She said, we're leaning blush and champagne. It's trending. I nodded. Then she said something I'll never forget. Marcus thinks you try too hard. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was afraid that if I opened my mouth, years of heartbreak would come spilling out. She left early that night. Said she had a call with the florist. I watched her drive away, the same taillights I used to wait for in the driveway after curfew. Except now, she wasn't late. She was leaving early by choice. And the house was quiet again. Too quiet. It used to echo with her dance music, her hairdryer, her late-night phone calls. Now the silence had a personality. It was sharp, unforgiving. In that silence, I started asking questions I didn't want to answer. Had I raised her wrong? Did I love her too much? Was I blind to how much I was giving without ever asking for anything in return? That last question haunted me the most. Because the answer was yes. I gave without asking. And when you teach people that your love comes without limits, they stop checking if the line S been crossed. On the day she got her first job offer, she called me crying. Dad, she said, I'm not smart enough. What if I fail? I said, then you fail standing tall, and I'll be here to help you up. And she did fail. Twice. She lost 2 jobs before landing the third. I never said, I told you so. I just helped update her resume, drove her to interviews, covered her rent quietly when she couldn't. She never knew. She just said, I'm so lucky to have you. But luck has an expiration date. Apparently, so does loyalty. Because the moment she got stable, the moment she met Marcus, the calls slowed. The visits stopped. And the requests changed. They weren't about help anymore. They were about favors, transactions, funding. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being dad. I became him. I'll ask him. Check if he sent it. Tell him the caterer called. I saw the texts once. On her phone, briefly, while she scrolled par. T a thread. Not dad. Not father. Just him. And yet I still showed up. Because deep down, I believed love could override erosion. I was wrong. Love given endlessly without boundaries doesn't build connection. It builds assumption. And when assumption replaces appreciation, you become invisible. So I stopped. Not because I wanted to teach her a lesson, but because I finally learned mine. I wasn't the hero of her story anymore. I was a forgotten prologue. The man who once carried her on his shoulders had become too tall to see. So now I was stepping down. Not in anger, but in quiet relief. Because maybe the version of me she needed to leave behind was the same version I needed to let go of too. 3 days after Marcus stood on my porch, I got a letter in the mail. Not a text, not an email. A real letter. Handwritten. The envelope had no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was hers. Clara. I sat at the dining table and stared at it for a long time before opening it. The last time she wrote something by hand, she was 17, asking for a later curfew. This was different. The ink was shaky, the sentences uneven. She wrote, "Dad, I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know where to start. But I know I've hurt you. I know what I said at the wedding was cold, and what I didn't say was worse. I saw your face. You didn't cry, but something in you dropped. I told myself you were being dramatic, that you'd get over it. But when the calls stopped, when the accounts froze, when the messages went unanswered, I realized how much you had been holding up that I never saw. You made it all look easy. Now it's all falling apart. And Marcus doesn't know how to handle it. He thought you'd just keep showing up. So did I. But you stopped. And now I can't breathe. I miss you, and I'm sorry. Not for the wedding, but for the years before it. I think I started pulling away when I realized I didn't deserve everything you gave me. It felt easier to pretend you were just doing your job than to admit how much I needed you. I don't know if this fixes anything, but I had to write it. Love. Clara. I read it twice. Then once more. The words were honest, but I didn't know if they were enough. Regret is tricky. It shows up when the damage is already done and offers no guarantee that anything will be different. Still, it was the first time she'd said, "I miss you." I folded the letter and set it beside my coffee cup. Did I feel better? No, not yet. But something softened. The next morning, Marcus called again. I answered. His voice was tired, hollow. "Clara's not eating," he said. "She's not talking. I think she's blaming herself." "She should," I said. He didn't argue. "I think we messed up," he continued. "But I also think we never really saw what you were doing. You didn't want to." He paused. "You're right." There was silence between us. Then he said something unexpected. "She still has the stuffed bear," he said. "The one you gave her when she was a kid. It's in the closet. I found her holding it last night." I didn't say anything. He exhaled hard. "I don't know what to do. She won't talk to me. She just keeps staring at that bear like she's waiting for it to say something." I felt my throat tighten. "Tell her," I said, "that silence doesn't mean absence, but it does mean change. You're not coming to see her." "Not yet." "She thinks you hate her." "I don't." "Then why won't you just fix this?" "Because for once, it's not mine to fix." He didn't respond. And then he said, "Fair." That evening, I found myself standing in the garage again. Same spot, same cabinet. I opened a box labeled Memories. Inside were items I hadn't touched in years. A crayon drawing of me and Clara under a crooked sun. Her acceptance letter to university, still folded neatly with a pressed flower inside. The receipt from the first time I ever bought diapers. I sat on the cold floor, surrounded by decades of proof. Proof that I had loved, provided, carried. Even when nobody was watching. Especially then. I didn't cry. I just sat. And for the first time since the wedding, I allowed myself to feel proud. Not for what I gave, but for the fact that I had the strength to stop giving when it started costing me pieces of myself. Around midnight, my phone lit up. A new message. From Clara. No words. Just a photo. It was a picture of that bear, placed on the nightstand beside her bed. Below it, a caption. He never let me go, even when I pushed him away. I stared at the screen for a long time. The silence in the room didn't feel so heavy anymore. It felt earned. I put the phone down. Didn't reply. Not yet. Some bridges need time. And this one needed to be rebuilt from her side first. But I saw something in that message I hadn't seen in years. Not guilt. Not dependence. But awareness. And maybe that was a start. She started visiting once a week. No text first. Just the sound of tires in the gravel and a soft knock at the door, always around the same time, Thursday evenings, just before dark. Sometimes she brought pie. Sometimes nothing at all. We didn't talk much. She sat on the couch, curled her legs beneath her like she used to when she'd watch cartoons. I stayed in my chair, reading the paper or pretending to. She'd ask small things. Do you still use that grill I got you for Father's Day? Have you ever tried that new sandwich place near Main Street? I found that old sweater of yours in the attic. It still smells like coffee. Little things. Like pebbles tossed into deep water to see how far down it goes. She was testing the silence. I let her. Because healing doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly, one breath at a time. She never brought up the wedding again. Neither did I. Not directly. But one night, after 3 weeks of showing up, she noticed the frame had been turned back upright. The one from her 16th birthday. She didn't say anything. Just stared at it for a long time. Then looked at me. I didn't explain. She didn't ask. That was enough. The letter she had written me sat in the drawer by the front door now. I hadn't reread it, didn't need to. Sometimes I opened the drawer just to make sure it was still there. One Thursday, it rained. She showed up anyway. Drenched. Hair matted, jacket soaked. I handed her a towel, and she dried off in silence. Then she stood by the fireplace and said something that landed like a stone. I thought I wanted a new life. I looked up. But I just wanted a life where I didn't feel like I owed anyone, she said. And somehow, I convinced myself that meant cutting off the people who gave me everything. I stayed quiet. I was ashamed, she added. And when people feel ashamed, they do cruel things. They pretend the people who love them are problems. Is that what I was? I asked. She looked me in the eyes. Not a problem, she said. A mirror. That one word, mirror, made the room colder. Because she wasn't wrong. I was a mirror. Of everything she wanted to forget about who she used to be. A girl who needed help. Who failed. Who got rescued again and again. She wanted to be strong, and in her mind, that meant erasing the rescuer. I thought if I loved Marcus loudly, she whispered, I wouldn't have to admit how deeply I still needed you. I didn't flinch, didn't move, just let her stand there in the silence she created. I can't undo it, she said, but I can keep showing up, and I can keep proving that I'm not just sorry, I'm different. I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The air felt newer somehow, less heavy. Do you think I can earn my way back? She asked. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood, walked over to the coat rack, pulled off the old flannel she used to steal in winter, held it out to her. She took it slowly, wore it like a memory, sat down on the couch, and held the sleeves like they were made of thread and regret. You already started, I said. She looked at me. Tears again. But quieter now. Softer. Like rain tapping against glass, not crashing. The next week, she brought Marcus. He didn't talk much. Just nodded, awkward, uncertain. He helped clear dishes, thanked me for dinner, said this means a lot. I didn't respond. He wasn't the reason we were broken. But he had been the silence that let it happen. I could live with that now. Because Clara was speaking again. More than that, she was listening. And in her listening, I began to hear something I hadn't in years. Respect. Not because she needed something, but because she finally realized how much she already had. I didn't forgive her right away. Forgiveness isn't a doorway. It's a hallway. Long, narrow, echoing. And every step echoes with all the things you wish you could forget. But I kept walking. And so did she. Week after week. Her visits turned into real conversations. Real questions. Did it hurt, Dad, when I said what I said? Yes. Did you cry? No. Why not? Because crying meant I still believed I had a place in your life. I didn't. She swallowed hard. I want you back in my life. I never left yours, I said. You just turned off the lights. That conversation marked a turning point. She started calling on days that weren't Thursdays, asking for advice, sending pictures of recipes she ruined, telling me about job stuff again. Slowly, piece by piece, she was stitching me back into the fabric of her days. Not out of guilt, but out of realization. She had lost something real, and now she was willing to work to earn it back. And I let her. Not out of weakness. Not because I missed being needed, but because I had loved her long before she knew what love cost. And love like that doesn't break easily. It bends. It bruises. But it waits. Because sometimes the most powerful kind of love is the one that knows exactly when to walk away and exactly when to open the door again. It happened on a Sunday. The sun was still rising, gold spilling across the kitchen tiles like spilled paint. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. Clara. A single message. Don't make plans this afternoon. I need you somewhere. No explanation. Just a time, an address. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The address was familiar, the community center on 4th Street, the same place she used to volunteer as a teenager, running weekend events and passing out flyers like they were lottery tickets. I hadn't been there in years. Not since the annual father-daughter dance she begged me to attend when she was 12. I remember how tight her grip was on my hand back then, like I was the only anchor in her little world. That anchor had rusted, but maybe it hadn't broken. I arrived early, parked in the lot, and sat in the car for a while, watching the people file in. Families, kids, local council members. It looked like some kind of event, maybe a fundraiser or community award thing. I walked in just as they were starting. Chairs in neat rows, a podium at the front, balloons in pale gold and white. Clara stood near the front, holding a clipboard. She wore a simple dress, no flash, no makeup. But she looked grown. Not older, grown. She saw me, smiled. Not the I need something smile, not the for-show smile. Just real. She pointed to a seat in the second row. I sat. An older woman from the board gave a short welcome. Said this event was a special one, honoring people who had shaped the lives of others in unseen ways. I didn't think much of it until Clara walked to the podium. She looked nervous, cleared her throat, adjusted the mic. "Hi," she said. "Thank you all for coming." She paused, looked at the crowd, then looked directly at me. "There are people," she began, "who give their entire lives in service of others, not because they expect recognition, but because it's the only way they know how to love." She exhaled. "My father is that person." Silence. All eyes turned to me. I froze. "My dad raised me alone," she continued. "He was the one who packed my lunches, who stood at every recital, who held the camera at every graduation, even when there was nobody else clapping." The crowd listened. So did I. "I forgot that for a while," she said, voice cracking. "I forgot how much I owed him, not in money or gifts, but in the shape of who I am." I blinked. Once hard. I told him once that he wasn't needed anymore. Murmurs in the audience. "I didn't mean it," she said quickly, "but I said it. And sometimes saying the wrong thing at the wrong time can burn bridges you don't know how to rebuild." She looked down, collected herself. "I'm here today not just to say thank you," she said, "but to honor him publicly, because silence is what broke us, and words are how I'll try to heal us." She held up a plaque. Simple, wooden, engraved with clean letters. "To the quiet architect behind my entire life. Dad, you were always the foundation." Someone sniffled behind me. I couldn't move. Couldn't even breathe. She stepped down from the podium and walked toward me. Hands trembling, eyes wide, she held out the plaque. I didn't take it. Not at first. I looked at her. And in that moment, I didn't see the woman who had pushed me away. I saw the girl in a science fair t-shirt, holding a medal she didn't think she deserved. Now she was holding something else. Recognition. Real, unprompted, earned. I took the plaque. Not with anger, not with pride. With something quieter. Forgiveness. We hugged. No words. No cameras. Just us. the way it always should have been. After the event, we sat on a bench outside. She leaned her head on my shoulder like she used to. "I didn't know how to say all of that to you in private," she whispered. "That's okay," I said. "No, it's not," she replied, "but I'm learning." We sat there a while, watching the sky change colors. And as people walked by, some nodded at me. A few even smiled. But none of that mattered. Because she saw me. Really saw me. Not as the man who paid the bills. Not as the emergency contact. Not as a backup plan. As her father. And for the first time in years. That felt like enough. A week later, she brought up the lake house. It was sudden. We were having coffee at my kitchen table, quiet morning light cutting across the counter like ribbons. She stirred her tea slowly, then said, "Do you ever think about going back to the lake house?" I didn't answer. The lake house wasn't just a vacation spot. It was history. Built by my father, passed to me. Clara's summers were shaped by it. Fireflies, canoes, that rickety dock we threatened to replace, but never did. It had been years. After she moved in with Ma. Gus, she stopped going. After the wedding, I stopped thinking about it. "I found the key," she said, breaking the silence. "It was in that old green box in the garage." I sipped my coffee. She waited. Then softly she said, "What if we went, just us?" The words hung in the air like fog. I looked at her. Her eyes were steady, hopeful, but I hesitated. Because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And returning to old places doesn't always bring back what they once held. "I'm not sure that's a good idea," I said. She didn't argue, just nodded slowly. But her face cracked, barely, but enough. "I thought maybe it could be a new chapter," she said. "Something we build fresh. Not pretend like nothing happened, just start again." I looked at my hands. They looked older lately. Tired. She reached across the table, touched mine. Her hands had changed, too, stronger now. No longer the soft fingers that once held my pinky to cross the street. These were hands that had carried pain, made mistakes, held regrets. "I want to earn your trust again," she said. "Not just be forgiven, earn it." "That takes time," I said. "I have time." I nodded. But I didn't say yes. Because while her intentions were clear, my boundaries had become part of my survival. Later that night, I found myself in the garage again. The same green box sat on the shelf. Dusty, quiet. I opened it. There, beneath old tax forms and a flashlight that hadn't worked in years, was the lake house key. Brass faded, cold in my palm. I remembered the summers. Teaching her how to swim. Her panicking in the middle of the lake, arms flailing. Me jumping in, pulling her to the side, holding her as she cried, promising her she was safe. She believed me then. She hadn't questioned my arms, my presence, my love. I wasn't sure when that changed. Or maybe I was. Maybe it was the day she stopped calling me Dad and started calling me him. The memory soured the moment. I put the key back, closed the box. The next day, she didn't mention it again. But her smile was smaller. like she knew the answer without hearing it. That weekend, she invited me to dinner. At her place, the same house she once claimed they didn't need help with. It looked different now, not because of furniture or paint, but because this time she welcomed me in like I belonged. No performance, no guilt, just her and Marcus and a table set for three. I noticed the locket. It was sitting in the middle of the table, unopened. She saw me looking. "I'm not wearing it yet," she said. "I haven't earned that either." I didn't argue, didn't tell her she could, because maybe she was right. Some things aren't worn. They're carried through memory, through effort, through showing up. After dinner, Marcus offered dessert. Something store-bought and slightly too sweet. But we all ate it anyway. Clara poured tea, the same brand I always bought. She didn't say anything about that. She didn't have to. Sometimes the most honest apologies live in repetition, in actions that echo old love instead of begging for new acceptance. As I stood to leave, she handed me a small envelope. I raised an eyebrow. "Just open it later," she said. I nodded. That night, back home, I sat at the kitchen table again. Same light, same silence. I opened the envelope. Inside was a photo. A printed snapshot. It was the two of us, Clara and me, from the lake house 10 years ago. She was on my shoulders, her arms outstretched, flying. The dock behind us, crooked. The water calm. I turned the photo over. Written in her handwriting were the words. Some things were never broken, just forgotten. No signature. No date. Just that sentence. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel the weight of what we lost. I felt the outline of what we still might build. Fall came early this year. The leaves turned faster than usual, bright bursts of orange and red against a sky that had finally softened its grip on summer. I found myself standing on the porch one morning, coffee in hand, watching the wind pull color from the trees. Clara was coming over, not out of obligation, just because. She did that now. Showed up with groceries sometimes. Told me about her week. Asked about mine. No big declarations. No endless apologies. Just presence. And honestly, that was more than enough. She pulled into the driveway while I was still outside. Got out of the car and held up a small paper bag. "I brought those blueberry muffins you like," she said. I smiled. "They still make those." "I had to go to 3 bakeries," she said, grinning. "Worth it, though." We sat on the porch. No words at first. Just the sound of leaves moving and the creak of old wood beneath our chairs. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled something out. The lake house key. Same one. Still cold. Still brass. She placed it on the table between us. "I'll wait," she said. I looked at her. "However long it takes," she added. I didn't touch the key. Didn't make promises. But I nodded once. She smiled. That small, quiet kind of smile that says, we're okay. And we were. Not perfect. Not what we used to be. But okay. Later that night, after she left, I walked back outside. Held the key in my palm. The porch light flickered, a reminder that I still hadn't fixed the wiring. But it didn't feel urgent. Nothing did. Because life had slowed. Not in a sad way. In a steady one. I thought about that day, her wedding. Those words. You're not needed anymore. They no longer echoed like a wound. Now they sounded like a turning point. She didn't need me the same way. And maybe that was the point. Because what she needed now wasn't the father who showed up with solutions. She needed the man who stayed, even when he had no reason to. And I had. Through silence. Through space. Through the ache of being replaced. I had stayed not in her life, but in my own love. And when she came back, not asking to be rescued, but to reconnect, that's when healing began. True love isn't in the holding on. It's in knowing when to let go, and still leaving the door unlocked. I stood there a while longer, staring at the stars. Then I turned off the porch light. Went inside. And quietly, without thinking, I set the key on the hallway table, where it used to be. Not as an invitation, but as a sign. A simple message, without words. You're still welcome here. And maybe that was all either of us ever needed to hear. If this story moved you, there's more where that came from. Subscribe for more true, emotional journeys. Because sometimes healing begins with a story.